Mm-hmm.
Don't stop anything.
No, I didn't. I'm not
No,
stopping. I'm just looking
I
to
don't
see
know
what
why
you
we're not putting out. All right, so there it is.
There you go.
Okay, well, I'm sorry we're a couple minutes late. We're having a couple technical difficulties here. I'm Mike Avery, the president of the Virginia Saltwater Sport Fishing Association, and we're here tonight with Dr. Bob Allen, who's been fishing in our waters in Virginia now for over 50 years. Uh, I do want to thank our host. We're here in the home of Jerry Aycock, who does Aycock Web Designs. And Jerry, if you could turn the camera real quick, just to show his setup here, just briefly. Jerry has graciously volunteered his time and his resources to put on all of the technical stuff of Visa for us. He's been doing the webmastering, the form for us, all of our Gmail, our PayPal accounts, all of the stuff behind the scenes. I just wanted to thank Jerry because he's doing it all for free to Visa, and he's just donating his time and effort. So thanks Jerry for doing this for us. Little quickly about Visa. We formed Visa earlier this year. A group of us recreational saltwater anglers got together and formed a statewide association because we've never had a statewide association in Virginia to our knowledge. We've had some national organizations that have state chapters, but we wanted to have a state association so that when you give money or pay dues to our association, it stays in our state. It doesn't go off to some national headquarters and get siphoned off. And we have 10 board members, and all of us are working for free. No one's being paid in Visa. Uh, and we're all trying to get our association organized and formed still. And we've been hosting these live YouTube seminars. We did one last month with Max King, and here tonight we're with Dr. Bob Allen, and we've got a series of them planned once per month to do this for you guys. And we hope it helps you, the recreational saltwater angler. The other thing Visa does is we want to represent you, the angler, at the various fishing meetings throughout the local, state, and federal levels, so that as the fishery managers try to decide what to do about the fish and how many we can keep and the seasons, we want you, the recreational angler, to have a voice. And so please, if you're watching this, please consider joining Visa. You can go to our webpage at ifishva.org, and there's a place to sign on right there. And as a member, you'll have access to all of these videos for free. And over time, we hope to have quite a bit of a library. So we're here with Dr. Bob Allen, and first we're going to talk about an old school technique of wirelining. He's going to show us how he's been doing this now for not just recently, but for a very long time, and it produces fish. And a lot of anglers have kind of gotten away from wirelining, and it's not used very much. But he's going to show you some old school stuff, and then he's going to talk a little bit about his experiences fishing in the bay for 50 years. We're going to have a little chat about that and kind of see how that goes. Dr. Allen, how about a quick little, if you want to say a little introduction about anything?
No, I don't think it's necessary. I think that the story will explain itself as we go along.
Okay, well, let's start talking about wirelining then. So,
well, let me tell you a little bit about how I got into fishing. I think you'd be interested in that, and it is wirelining. I graduated from dental school in 1959, and I came back here where I was born and raised, and I practiced with a man named Dr. Alec Boatwright in downtown Newport News. He was 15 years my senior, and I didn't know it at the time, but I found out shortly that he was a expert saltwater fisherman, and of course that attracted me, and I encouraged Alec to take me fishing with him some, which he did, And he told me, though, I had to have Wireline, and I did not know what Wireline was. I didn't know anything. I had been fishing years and years ago on a headboat off Buckrow Beach when I was about 10 years old, and we went croaker fishing. And all we used was, I guess you call it shark line or linen line, and we wrapped it around a stick, and you had a lead sinker on the bottom of it, and we loaded the boat with croakers, catching them with shrimp. So, but I loved fishing, and so Alec took me to, we didn't have tackle shops in those days. And so he took me to somebody's confectionery store on Jefferson Avenue, about 23rd Street and Jefferson Avenue. And in the back of that confectionery store, the guy had a section set up like a tackle shop. And so Dr. Boatwright said, I want you to fix up Bob Allen with some Wireline. And I bought a reel, and I think it was called a 49M. It was a narrow reel, a Mariner. And they gave me a rod, and it had rollers on it, very much like we have today. It was a short rod, and they put braided wire on it, stainless steel braided wire, about the same that we still use, which is 60-pound test wire, which I still use. I've gone to other reels now and other things, but they gave us, we were going to fish the James River Bridge, and they fixed me up with leader and a couple of sinkers, a couple of inline sinkers, probably about 10 ounces. They're very much like this, but much smaller. This is about 20 ounces, and it was much smaller than that. It was much smaller than that. But they also, we put a couple of spoons on there, and we used steel, a Monell leader, and I had braided wire line. Before I had gotten involved in this, he had been introduced to Wireline probably 5 years before I had, and that's a unique story because everybody was using linen at that time. There was nothing else to use, and some recreational angler at the James River Bridge called him and said, Alec, I want you to come and see something. And Alec went and looked, and the guy said, they knew he caught a lot of fish. Everybody knew this guy named Miller caught a lot of fish, but they didn't know his secret weapon. His secret weapon was he had some Monell line on a reel, a wire line on a reel, and it didn't have much resistance. He didn't get, when he got hung up, he could get off. And Alex said, I'll never use wire. And but he did. He started using wire, and all of his friends that fished with him said, we'll never use wire. We're going to use linen forever and ever. You know, people, it's difficult for people to change. Particularly as you get older like I am, it's really difficult to change. And that's why I'm still using wire. It's so difficult for me to change. But he taught me to use wire. We went to James River Bridge, and the setup is almost the same still to this day. For me, it's the same. Other people have moved on because they came up with spider wire, and that is much stronger and finer. But if you get close to the bridge and to pilings, you can cut off pretty easily.
That braided line just cuts like a knife.
It cuts like a knife.
Yep.
My wire, you know, it's very strong, and we always fish structure when we're fishing trolling. I troll with it for rockfish, and if I get hung up, I can jerk that sucker off of there, you know. And I have friends that Wireline. There's still a lot of people at Wireline, but most of it's hard work. It's heavy. It's hard work. And I've got my reel here. I'll show you. I've been using this reel, this style, probably 10 years. Now, the people I fish with are using a smaller reel, but I'm just stuck with this. You know, that's a 5. What is that, a 5?
This is a looks like a
330. That's a 330. That's right.
A Penn GTI 330.
Now, a lot of people go to a smaller one, which is 320.
There's a 320. I have a 320.
And it works very well. The friends that I use don't use this 60-pound test. They use 45. But I find that my 60-pound test will last 2 years if I take care of it. By taking care of it, I mean I wash it with soap and water, spray WD-40 on it every trip. But you know what happens when it gets frayed? We talked about that. You know,
right.
When you get frays on it, what happens to your fingers? You know, it really eats you up, you know, because you got to thumb it. You always have to thumb it. You're always thumbing it. You know, you're always, when you're trolling, you're almost always, it's almost in free spool. It's almost always.
So you wear a leather glove though, right?
A lot of the times. A lot of times I just take the pain. A lot of times I just take the pain.
I use a glove.
My hands aren't useful to me. I'm just a dentist, you know, so my fingers don't mean anything to me. But, and they get torn up sometimes. Now, when we started fishing, we were using a trolling sinker, and we would drop it back, and when it hit the bottom, we'd crank about 2 turns, and we just troll on the pilings. Now, over James River Bridge, the bottom is clean there. There's not a lot of junk on the bottom there, and we could troll from one end to the other, you know, and be a few feet off the bottom. And for some reason, in the daytime, the rockfish are on the bottom. At nighttime, they come up on the lights. You know, you fish one with light tackle, but you can't fish up against structure. We want to be as close as we can to the bottom where those pilings are. We want to be fishing right along those pilings, bumping the pilings occasionally, bumping the sand occasionally. And so somebody came along with the idea from Carolina. They called it a Carolina rig, and it was what you did instead of using a trolling sinker, inline trolling sinker. What they did was they fixed you up with about a 20-foot leader, you know, 50-pound test, 30-pound test, and a lure. Now we were using spoons, and then we started using bucktails. This happens to be one I made. This is a big one. That's
like a 5-inch storm.
It's a small one. It's a small one, maybe 4. I use that all the time now.
Yeah.
I use that over this. But Jack caught his fish today. We're using that. You know, now I used to make my own. I poured all my lead sinkers, and I used to make. I just love to pour them, and I love to make my.
Yeah.
But this curly tail, we used to use pork rind. You'd buy pork rind like this, and this is probably about 10 years old. I don't use it much anymore. It's dried out. But people started going these curly tails, and boy, they're great. You know, with the bucktail, they're good, and they're good now. They're good right now. But I just wanted to show it to you. They came out. The Carolina rig was they had a long leader, 20-foot leader, and you had a.
So this is 20 feet to the swivel.
That's about 20 feet. That's right. Here was a 3-way swivel. Right here's a 3-way swivel, common, heavy duty, because you're going to be up against the bridge and rocks and structure.
So why do you want a 20-foot leader?
You want the thing to bobble around. You want to swing into the pilings. You want to have action. You want it to have plenty of action.
Yeah.
If you've got about a 3-foot leader, it's just going to follow your line.
It's just going to stay right behind.
Yeah, I don't want. Now we had about a 4-foot line coming off of this 3-foot swivel, and it's on there. That's right, there it is.
Yeah.
And so you have you just bump. That's called a bottom bouncer. They called them a Cannonball years ago, and it just bounces along the bottom. That's all it does. Now you can do that James River Bridge because what is structure. And when we find the fish like they are up in the bay now, up around Deltaville. We used to go up to Deltaville in November and catch them in the open. And there's nothing there. And so you can just put your bottom bouncer on, drop it down, boom, 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 bounce as you go along. You know your lure is about 4 feet off the bottom. It may be closer to the bottom of that because the lure may drop.
Right.
But we have used plastic lure, plastic bucktails. We used to make plastic bucktails too that were weightless. That one's plastic. Feel that. I think that's plastic. That's plastic. That doesn't have any lead.
I think it's that's just the paint soft on it on the lid.
No, it's plastic. It'd be heavier. Take that off and you'll find out there's no lead in it. If there is, it's just a little bit. I may have put some.
Yeah.
That ain't got anything in it. I may have put some lead shot in it. Sometimes when I would make them,
that
I put
is plastic around the hook.
Yeah, I put it in a regular sinker mold. So we used to use plastic
because you want this to be light.
Yeah, sometimes you want to flutter around. You know, sometimes it's too heavy. If it was all lead, it was very heavy. Okay. So that is a plastic one, and these are good right now. If you go up the bay right now fishing up at the Cut Channel, you're in the open. The 50 feet of water. It's deep up there, and you've got to use a lot of lead. You've got to use a lot of lead. Now we were just up there last week because there aren't any rockfish down here. We're not catching rockfish down here. And I heard they were catching them way up at the Cut Channel, about 5 miles north of Wolf Trap, about 3 weeks ago. And I said, and we did it. We went up there about a year ago, and we caught them up there. And when they weren't here, because we just haven't had rockfish here in the kind of 3 and 5 pounders. We just haven't had them down here. So when I go to the bridge tunnel, there's just no fish there. I went today, and there just weren't any fish there. That's all. And there used to be lots of fish there. I mean, I could go out in the middle of winter. It didn't matter when, you could summer, winter. Dr. Boatwright was quoted the other day. I was watching one of these old tapes that I taped, and he said his best fishing, well, it was year-round. He fished at James River Bridge year-round. He fished year-round. He said August was his poorest month. And you know what he did in August? They went cobia fishing. He went 2 kinds of fishing, and he took me a couple of times. But this is really, wireline is heavy. That's a small sinker for wireline. I like a 28 ouncer. I used a 26 ouncer all day today. But now, it used to be smooth bottom out at the bridge tunnel, but now they've added so many rocks, it's a mess for wireline. A lot of people are giving it up because you lose so much tackle. I have some friends, thank you, I have some friends that are wireliners, and they take probably 200 pounds of lead when they go. And if they hang up, there'll be 5 of them fishing. They do mostly use it for flounder. They do the same technique flounder fishing. And when they go, if they get hung up, they just break it off and put a line and tie another sinker on. And they lose a lot of sinkers. Several years ago, a friend of mine said, let's get away from the Cannonball. Let's make a longer sinker. And he made some sinkers that were about that long, and they were 25 ounces. He made his own mold. And he said, I don't think I hang up as much. I said, well, if you don't hang up as much with that, how about a really long sinker? And maybe it'll bounce over the rocks. And so I went to Lowe's or somewhere like that, and I bought conduit, steel conduit, very cheap. Took a tube cutter, cut it. That's a coat hanger on that end.
Okay.
Hammered it in. It's up in here, so it won't come in. I hammered it closed, put it in the ground, or put it in a board like that, so it'll fall over. And then I would pour my lead in this end. And so I had my sinker. Now, depending on the length, would be how long. And then I had some scales, and I would weigh them, and that one is a 32-ounce sinker.
So you're saying that this sinker
Does not
hangs up much less
Hangs up
than
much less.
a regular
Oh,
sinker.
definitely. And if I hang up, if my captain is willing to go back, I can almost always just lift it out. It just comes out of the rocks. I just don't lose sinkers anymore. Matter of fact, I sold most of my lead pouring things to other fishing club members. I think that, did I show you this? You've got to have a belt.
Yes.
You've got to have a belt.
I haven't seen too many belts like that anymore.
Well, it still works. I go looking for this kind of belt. I like the leather belts. I'm old-fashioned. I'm old-fashioned, and I don't want to try the new plastic ones or anything like that. So I go trying to find these old ones.
No Velcro on that one.
No, it's all, and it works fine. It's got I think it's getting a hole worn in it, but it's got a steel plate in there. There's a metal plate in there somewhere, so it won't matter. The storm lure. Show me that storm lure. This storm lure, somebody said they were catching them. I used to use bucktails all the time. You'd pour my own bucktails and everything. And somehow I got on storm lures, and I've been using storm lures of different sizes for about, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 years.
That's my favorite, by the way. I think they call this pearl white.
I don't know what. I use all different colors. I have all different colors. I want to tell you about one, but I use heavy sinkers, and the wire I use the wire that I use comes in a spool. I think it's 5 strand. Now, I use wire almost everywhere. I'm really a wire believer. I think Dr. Boatwright mentioned Basin Bar. Somebody got me this. Yes, excuse me, thank you.
So this is called.
I think it's 5 strand, maybe 6 strand.
This says 7-stranded stainless steel trolling wire.
100 yards.
And this is a 60-pound test, and you got 1,000 feet in here. So
yeah, somebody gave that to me. My son bought it somewhere. He got it. Somebody was closed out their shop, and I haven't used it yet. But you have to replace it. If you're a serious fisherman, you got to replace it about every year or two.
Because they get nicks in it, and
they get rusty. It gets rusty. I had a friend that, knowing that I'm a dentist, I have a friend that made me a fishing lure several years ago, and it's a toothbrush. It's a toothbrush, and he made it for me to catch a rockfish on. And I took it on the boat, and one day we were over at the high rise of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, and just catching, 30-pound, 20-pound rockfish. Just all you had to do is get a lure down there, and you'd catch it on wireline. All you had to do is get the wire down. When I wireline for rockfish to bridge, I want the current running hard. That's when they bite. But you got to use a lot of lead. You're going to lose sinkers. You're going to lose lures. But we were catching left and right. And I said to my friend, I said, Bobby, I gotta put that lure on because I got to catch a fish with my toothbrush. And so I had my VCR camera with me, and I was taking pictures. I have lots of VCR pictures I've taken over the 25 years, whatever. I bought a camera just for taking fishing pictures, I think, more than anything else. So I hooked one, I pulled it in, and I said, Bobby, hold that up. Bobby held it up, and I took pictures of it, and I said, oh my gosh, look, we caught that rockfish while he was brushing his teeth. Everybody laughed. It's a toothbrush. It's a real toothbrush. What is that?
Toothbrush lure.
Is that an Oral B30 or something like that?
It's a Reach.
It's a Reach. Yeah, it's a Reach toothbrush. and then we put a rubber tail on. That's a good rubber tail, by the way.
I wanna try to cast this. To a
No,
school.
you won't be able to do that. It's too heavy. I mean, it's too light.
I bet I can cast it.
Nah, you can't do that. You can't do that.
A toothbrush lure catches fish, is your point, right?
Anything. Listen, when they're biting, they catch them. Anything. We've caught fish. I know there are a lot of people watching this have caught rockfish with this caught in their mouth. Caught in their mouth. They didn't. The lure was way behind them somewhere. They pull it in, and this thing was in there. I've heard of them being caught. This thing went through and out the gill cover because they hit that. You know, they'll hit anything. If they're there and they're biting, they'll hit anything. It just happens. We don't have a lot of rockfish here right now. You got any questions for me, Mike?
I do. Just a couple of questions, and then we'll go to the audience questions on wirelining that come across there. So if anyone has questions, you can go to the chat panel on the YouTube page and ask a question. And I may have to ask Gary to read them to me because I don't know if I can read that far. But I was going to ask, what are some of your favorite places to wireline in this area?
Anywhere. I mean, I like the structure. Yeah, structure. You got to have it on structure, and that's where the fish are going to be. Now, sometimes they'll be in open. We saw birds working today on the way home from the bridge, hoping there'd be a few birds there. It was near Bluefish Rock Reef, but we stopped and they were scattered. The birds, you'd stop, the birds would go everywhere, you know. But I like it around structure or drop-offs. So I'm fishing the bridge tunnel 99% of the time. I like the tubes. The tubes are very productive. Along the pilings is productive. And you don't see birds. You're fishing, and you just got to know the fish are there. You got to have confidence.
So, how fast are you normally trolling when you're wirelining?
Actually, we troll pretty fast. I had a twin diesel boat, and I couldn't slow it down very much. I've seen other people had a similar boat, and they would drag 5-gallon bucket behind it, which was just to try to slow the boat down. But I just ran one engine. And I was slow enough, but I had to use a heavy sinker. Now, I was fishing with Jack today, and his a small boat, and it runs slowly, and I was having a little bit more trouble because he was using a lighter sinker than and I was using a heavier sinker, and I don't think my line was getting in like it should have. Because I think what I was saying is, the point is, I don't think you could go too fast for rockfish. I think you can go too fast for flounder. And we fish for flounder exactly the same way. As a matter of fact, when we first started fishing out of the bridge tunnel, we went because we heard they were catching big trout out there. And right north of the fourth island, there was a big hole there. And there were big trout there. And you could catch them on wireline with a big sinker and a bucktail. And I remember one day we filled up a green garbage can. We literally filled it up with 5-pound trout. Terrible, sinful thing because the trout are gone. I'm sorry to admit it, but that's happening with a lot of things now, you know. Another question?
So, when you're trolling, for example, the islands of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, you're trying to get as close as you can to the rocks, and you're trying to put the sinker and lure where the rocks meets the sand. Is that true? Or
Yeah.
You're not just trolling the rocks. So you're trying to.
Sometimes you're pulling over the rocks. But now remember, I'm not pulling over the rocks. I don't really fish the islands. I'm fishing the tubes. I am fishing the tubes, not the island. I don't fish the island. I fish the trestle behind the island, and I fish the tubes. That's where I fish.
So you get beyond the islands, and you're going to work over top of the tubes.
Yes. And it's hard because you're going to get hung up some. But if the fish are there, you don't worry about getting hung up because the fish bite your lure. If you're not catching anything, you're going to get hung up in the rocks. And that's simple as that. If we're out there and we start losing tackle and everything, it means the fish are not there, they're not feeding aggressively, and we're wasting our time. Because the fish won't let you get past them if they're there. And then you don't lose much tackle. When we start losing tackle, it's the fish are not there. That's all.
Yeah.
Either we're hung in the piling or we're hung on the rocks. And there are a lot of rocks now. The Bridge Tunnel Authority discovered that after they built that tunnel, that the currents have washed out some of those pilings, and they have had to put lots of rocks down there. And it's wonderful for the tog fishermen and for other types of fishing, flounder fishing, but it's awful for the wireliner because we have to deal with the rocks, and they're a mess. I'll tell you. That's why I started going to these. You know.
Yeah.
And it helps. I'm just telling you, it helps. It's not a 100% solution, but it helps.
So how many anglers can fish in a small boat at once? I mean, is
It
there
depends. A lot of I've seen them on a 25-foot boat. I've seen 5 people trolling. I don't know how they do it. I on my 32 Albemarle that I had that was pretty wide, we could fish 3 anglers across the stern. Actually, I would fish also. I was fishing from the fly bridge, so we had 3 and 4 anglers fishing. But a small boat's a little tough. Three. Usually the captain will be angling because the man running the boat can tell where his line is on the bridge. He knows how far he's got to be off the bridge because he can feel his line, and he really is the master of the fishing trip.
do you have to feel when the fish is biting and set the hook, or they generally set
No,
themselves?
they do. They bite it. You got it. You just start cranking them in.
You just start
They go
cranking
boom,
them
boom,
in.
boom. Your pole starts boom, boom, boom.
Okay.
A lot of people think they're hung up. If you get a big one, they'll say, "Oh gosh, I'm hung up." Somebody's a novice, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm hung up on the bottom." And I look at their pole, just going, I said, "No, you're not hung up.
That's a
I
fish.
wheel and get the boat off the bridge. You wheel and get it off because those fish have got the current in their favor, and they'll swing into behind the piling. So you wheel that thing around quickly and goose it and get away from the bridge, and then you slow down or cut the ends down and let them crank the fish in. But a lot of people that are novices think they are hung up with the first fish they catch because the rockfish pulls hard, and a lot of the fish we catch out there are 10, 12 pounds.
Yeah.
Not anymore, but that's the way they were. Shoot me another one.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Did you have any questions, Jerry? I don't see any on the chat panel. So we can move on to the next segment. But just to review, I used to wireline too, and I don't know why I've gotten away from it. I had a couple wire rigs in my garage, and I would try it occasionally, and I caught fish on it.
It catches
And
fish.
I can't.
I tell people that you talk to the wireliners, they catch fish. And there are other people that don't. And I'm talking about numbers. And I remember one day we were out fishing, and my brother-in-law and his son were there, and they didn't know anything about it. But we would let them line down and say, just hold on to the line. And we were fishing right beside the tubes at the 4th island. And we caught 16 flounder. It was in June. We caught 16 flounder. And I was reminded recently, not a single one was under 5 pounds. It was on Wireline. There are not that many flounder out there now.
Well, I got a question from Mrs. Avery, my other half. She says, "What do you think of the saying, if it ain't chartreuse, it ain't no use?" Do you like chartreuse?
I don't care. I don't care about the color. We were discussing that, like that toothbrush. I think they're going to hit it. If they're biting, they're going to hit it. If they're biting, they're going to hit that. It don't matter what it is. I had a friend that used to fish at the high rise, and he used bucktails that had no hair on them. They were lead. He never painted them. All he would do is put a bucktail on the curly tail. He didn't bother painting them or anything. I used to fish a high rise on Thanksgiving Day. Every Thanksgiving Day.
You can read it.
I used to fish the high rise every Thanksgiving Day. We would leave at daybreak. I guess it was 6:30, and it would be 3 of us. We'd go over to the high level over there, and we would catch 6 fish, 2 apiece, and they were all about 34, 36 inches because we had limits in those days. You couldn't catch them over 32 or 36 or something. And I was back at my dock. It's 15 miles over there. And I was back at my dock by 9:30. I was in my car driving to my sister's house in Richmond for big Thanksgiving dinner. I did that for years and years and years. I'd go over there, and I wasn't on the boat over there. I mean, you had to get in line because there were so many people wirelining. You had to run down and get in line and come back up, and then you go back and do it again because you couldn't break in the line. The boats were so close together. And we were all catching rockfish. And I would catch 6 and go home. And I did it every Thanksgiving for years and years and years. And they may be over there today. I don't know. We didn't get over there. My feeling was if we go to another day, in another week or so, we ought to try the high rise. We haven't tried it in a long, long time. I mean, in years. And I think we ought to give it a try. There may be some big fish over there because that's where they seem to show up.
Got a question from Scott. He said he has an old pin reel that has a leather thumb tab made into the bottom bar on the back of the reel. Does anyone make these now to add to a reel? Be great for wireline or braid.
That's what it was for. And I think that was made for wirelining. I think that thumb tab. I've had them. Mike has had them. I use a glove now. I use a leather glove. But if your wire gets old and frayed, it's going to tear up your glove, and you need a wet leather thumb guard on it. It's pretty nice. They had a little snap. You could buy them. You used to be able to buy them, but that was years ago at the tackle shops.
Now, what I did on my last wireline setup, I took an old belt in my closet, and cut the end of it that had the loops on it that the buckle attached to, and you get the buckle off of there. And then I took some zip ties.
What'd you do? Grow the belt and get too
Yeah,
get too small for you?
I got a lot of skinny belts and skinny clothes, and they're still in my closet. But then you just take the zip tie and you attach it here on this bottom bar or somewhere on the reel, and then you have
It'll lay right in there.
a leather belt, you know, about maybe 3 inches long, and you can use
It's a brake.
you
You
can
use
use
it like
the
a brake.
leather belt like a brake
Instead of your thumb being the brake.
instead of cutting
Instead of
your
your
thumb up.
thumb, because you'll tear
But
your thumb up.
you've got to have because they will get nicks and burrs in the Wireline.
Yeah.
And you don't want to. You want to have either a leather glove or a piece of leather on there. Yes.
Now, a lot of people are, not doing this anymore. They're going to braided, Dacron, or whatever they call it. What do they call these new lines? Synthetic wire. What do they call
braid. The latest one is called Spectra.
Yeah, Spectra and that sort of thing.
Power Pro.
And I have a reel or two with that, and I use it occasionally, but I don't use it around the bridge or anything like that. I still use my old wire, my old steel wire, and most of the people that have tried it are disappointed with it fishing around structure.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. Murphy asked if you would compare Wireline versus Power Pro 100-pound for open water.
I think they both work. In open water, I think the Power Pro would work fine. I think it's great in open water.
Okay, yeah. And David asked, are you positioned up current or down current of the tunnel when trolling along it?
I am always up current. So that my line swings back. I want my line to swing back onto the structure, wherever it is, always.
Yeah, if you're down current, because you got a 20-foot leader, now the lure is 20 feet away
It's
from
all
the
it's
structure.
out in the ocean or something.
It's 20 feet away from where you
and
want.
the fish are near the structure.
Up current, it flutters right into
the Sometimes it'll flutter between the pilings. Sometimes somebody will have a fish on, and we'll pull the boat out, and one or two people still have their lines in the water, and they've gotten their fish cranking up, and that line is going to flutter, and then they hook up too. If they don't hook up too, same time, and because it's falling into the to where the fish stay. And I've heard of people that go up to the pilings and just drop their line down with a heavy sinker with wire and just jig it a few times and hook up. But the fish have got to be plentiful. They've got to be plentiful to be there to do that.
Murphy asked, how far back, and can you compare 32-ounce weights versus the lighter weights?
Well, you're going to fish the bottom, and I think it has to do with the speed you're going, the size of line, the current, and that sort of thing. You want to fish that corner, the bottom and the pilings. You want to fish in that corner right in there. And sometimes you can't handle it. Over the high rise, that current gets to running so strongly, we just can't fish it. Your boat is almost at the other bridge. Your line is going so.
Yeah.
We've used 32 ounces over there, and you still sometimes just. You can't hold. It's just too strong. It's deep. Some of the place over is 100 feet deep at the high rise. So James River Bridge, 25 feet deep. You don't need a lot of lead. There's current there, but not a whole lot. All along the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, sometimes it gets ferocious, sometimes it's not. I like running current. I don't even want to try to. I just feel like it's unproductive with rockfish. The man I was fishing with today said. Let's go over to Third Island and catch it at the break of the tide. Well, he and I don't agree on that. I think I want the running current. I want it running hard when I'm wireline fishing for rockfish.
Have you ever tried wireline in any of the artificial reefs?
Not too much. No, not too much. No. I would say no. I like the bridge because I can line up with the pilings, and you know where you are all the time. Whereas you don't know where the structure is. You go over a hump. But you don't have, then you're over. You're done. And
then you got to find the next one. Yeah, the artificial reefs have. Some of the pieces are pretty scattered out.
Yeah. I think it's good for bottom fishing. Now I'll tell you, I use wire for bottom fishing. I use wire for everything. I got interested in rep fishing. Several years ago, and we would go out, and I had another line that was similar to this, and I put Monell on it. I put solid line on it, and I used that on wrecks. And I like it. At 100 foot, when I was like 50 feet to 100 feet, I like the wire because you can feel the wreck, you can jerk it off, you don't tear up, you may lose a bottom rig or something like that. But I like wire everywhere I go and for everything. And I could use this one, but I used to have a Monell, one that had This has braided wire. The Monell, the problem with Monell is it's either stiffer, and if you get it real light, like 45-pound wire, and you use it a long time, if it gets a kink in it, it won't take long and it'll break on you.
Yeah.
You've lost it. Whereas braided wire, you can get a kink in it, it'll take a little while for it to break. And we do get kinks in them, and you better just cut it off and just move on.
Okay, so I recommend we move into part 2 of our segment here.
All right.
So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna rewind a little bit and go back in time before I was born, before many of us were even born, and I'm talking a little bit after World War II days.
Well, there were not many recreational fishermen in those days.
No,
not very many at all. And there were no tackle shops. There were no tackle shops. And the boats that we had, they had. I didn't have them. They were slow, and there just was no recreational fishery at that time. But there were a few men who did. But first of all, they started rowing their boats out to wherever they wanted to fish. Then they would get outboard motors, small outboard, and take them to like Red's Pier, and they could rent a boat and put their outboard motor on it and go out and bring it back and take it off. And then they bought their own boats and they started fishing in the James River. They have all these places like Rock Shoals and Rack Shoals and Burrell's Bay, and Dr. Boatwright took me to some of those places, but the more productive place was down closer to where he kept his boat in a small boat harbor, and that was there was a place called Pics Point, and it was an old World War I pier. And you can see it when you go over to M&M right now. When you go over to M&M and you're on the other side, if you look over towards Tidewater Community College campus to the west, you'll see some old piers that come out about a half a mile, and right on the end of that is deep water. It's an old World War I pier, and we used to catch a lot of rockfish right off the end of the pier because it was real close to the small boat harbor. There was also a platform there, a munitions platform. Do you remember the munitions platform that was in Hampton Roads?
In the Hampton Bar area.
Yeah, all right. Well,
yeah,
there was another one, though. There was another one before that, and it was over near Middle Ground Light. It's near where the island on the M&M is. M&M? Yeah, M&M is near that island. And he and I fished that. We'd go out there at nighttime and put a lamp over in October and just knock the heck out of rockfish there with bloodworms. Just catch 50, 75 rockfish at nighttime because it was real close to his doctorate. He used to fish the lighthouse there, Middle Ground Light, and he caught a lot of fish at Middle Ground Light, which is still there. But I think the bridge tunnel being built there, it has moved those fish to the bridge tunnel, the M&M, the Monitor Merrimack. I think the fish are congregating there. There was also the sewage, the saltwater, sanitation department. They built a treatment plant down there, and the effluent goes out under a pipe out there near the tugboat channel. And on a good day, you can see a slip coming up there, and there's pipes and stuff down there. And we used to go down there and troll, wireline over there. And I think Dr. Boatwright said the biggest fish he ever caught was 19 pounds. It was caught right over the end of that, sewage pipe. We used to catch black drum there. Over that, it's still there.
So go back a little bit further now. What got you into fishing, and when did you start fishing, and kind of at what age?
Well, my father took me fishing when I was about 10 years old.
Give me a time frame.
Well, that would have been 1944.
Okay.
And then when I came back out of school, we got with Boatwright, and he was a serious angler, and he was good at it, and so I got to be a serious angler too. And I think that's what wireline anglers are, pretty serious fishermen. I think they're very serious anglers. It's hard work. It's not easy, and I've vowed to give it up a couple of times, but I don't throw it away. I still, like today, I rely on it, and I think it's really good in open water, and like anywhere in the ocean. We use it in the ocean all the time. People are going to storm. What do they call those lures now? They're I don't use them, so I don't know the name of them. They drag them on monofilament. It has a lip on it. It goes. I can't remember.
Like spoons?
No. We used to use spoons a lot. We first started, we were fishing to high-rise stretches. That's right. Yeah, a lot of people use stretches because they're easy. They're easy to use, and this is not easy. But we would go out in the ocean, and we'd look for birds. We would go around the corner, Smith Island, go off there, Smith Island Shoals, and we'd look for gannets, of course. And when you see the gannets, if they're working or not working, we'd put a big sinker over with a spoon on it, or any kind of lure. As I said, if they're biting, and we used some rubber eels for a while, and then we used at one time we used I would get dead eels and rig them myself. You know, put hooks in them and everything just like a lure, and put them on. I'd freeze them and take a few of them on the boat, and we'd drag dead eels, and they thought it was a live eel, you know. And going off the eastern shore, we would catch so many big rockfish out in the open, and this wire was so wonderful because you're on the bottom, you're right where the fish are, and the fish could be up, but we were always catching them. Even if the birds died down, if you could stay in the same vicinity, you'd still catch rockfish. You know, if you stay right there, the rockfish are still there. They haven't gone anywhere.
So, describe some of your tackle that you had, but way back when you started fishing in the 40s and 50s,
All right,
as compared to today. Just give a brief description.
It wasn't
of
much different. It wasn't really much different. I used wire, and I used bottom bouncers, and we used the rig is about the same, and we caught flounder.
Were your poles fiberglass poles like this?
Yes,
or were they...
yes. Now, before I came, they were using something called bamboo and Calcutta, you know, and I never had anything like that. They made their own. These serious fishermen, they would buy a piece of bamboo, and they would put loops on them. We didn't have fiberglass, you know, and so now I want to tell you one thing about it, though. We heard, when I was fishing, we fished for trout and rockfish, and then we heard they were catching bluefish off Virginia Beach. And so we started taking a boat around, and we were not far off the beach, you know, and we were dragging this very rig. We were on the bottom. We were in maybe 35 feet of water, and we were catching 5 and 10 pound bluefish. And we started moving our boat over to Rudy because it had opened up as a marina about that time, and you could rent a dock there. Before that, before we started fishing over there, it was kind of like salt ponds used to be. There was just a little water flowing over the sand. You know, there wasn't any, and the city bought it, dredged it all, and made it into a marina. And they invited 5 boats to come over there and operate a charter fleet. One of them was Marshall Smith from Picosa. He took his boat over there. Well, after that, about 5 years later, we were going over there because they were catching bigger fish and regular fish off Virginia Beach. And so we started taking our wireline over there, and they were doing it too. They were using wireline too. The commercial boats, the charter boats, were using wireline because that's what you had to do to get down to 50 feet of water. And we would catch bluefish, but I came to the dock one day, and somebody had some different fish. And I said, "What are those?" And they said, "Oh, they're tuna." And so we said, "That's interesting." And they said they're about 5 miles further out. So we went out there and we finished catching all bluefish one morning. We noticed 2 or 3 boats about noon were slipping off to the east. So we followed them, and we got out there, and there was a 23-foot boat fishing along. You know, we felt like we could ask him some questions because he was our speed. And we said, "What are you catching?" He said, "Tuna." We said, "How do you do it?" And he said, "All you do is put a feather on and just drag it and go the same speed we're going," because they were going a little faster, but their lures were on top of the water. They weren't trying to stay on the bottom, you see. And tuna are fast. We didn't know that. Tuna are fast. And so we said, "We don't have," he said, "Put a feather on." We didn't have any feathers. I said, "All we got's a bucktail with some hair on it." He said, "Use that, it'll work." So we had our wire lines, and we took the sinkers off, and we just free spooled it back into the back of the boat, and we speeded up, and in a minute we had a fish. It went, bzzz, ping. And he broke. It was so fast, he broke. We had to leave. We had to drag too tight. So we learned, we put another lure on, put it again, caught another one. And finally we learned you got to loosen the drag a little bit, let them run, and you also got to stop the boat and get the fish in. And they were about 4 or 5 pound tuna. And we started going tuna fishing, and that was the big fishery here, I guess for 10 or 15 years, right off Virginia Beach. And they were located.
What time frame was this?
It was June, about end of May. I would take the boat. We would take the boat over there the first weekend in June. It was always the first weekend in June. We'd take it over and rent a slip, and we left it over there.
What year are we in?
Okay.
With the bluefin
to 72, 70 to 70 to
in the early
80,
70s.
70 to 80.
Okay.
And then it disappeared. I told you some time ago that they were feeding on sand eels on top of these mounts. There's some sea mounts out there.
Right.
Southeast lumps, hot dog, fish hook.
Fish hook.
And they were huge schools of them out there. Never birds working on them. There you could see them on the water rippling. You could just see them. Sometimes they jumping over the water, and they ran up to 50 pounds, and there were just thousands of them. But the commercial boats from New England came down and with an airplane took care of that fishery for us. And maybe the sand eels. I don't know, because sand eels disappeared too.
Well, you see more sand eels up north.
Yeah, well, we used to have them here. We used to have the fish would land them, and they'd spit up a whole handful of sand eels in the back of the boat. And but that fish disappeared. Fishery disappeared. Now, you were asking me, how did we, in those days, we didn't have any navigational aids. We used dead reckoning and we had a good depth recorder. And so we were looking, I could never have found a wreck in those days. But we could find the lumps. We knew where the fish were because we would leave Rudy Inlet and my boat went about 15 miles an hour. And I knew that if I used to run an hour and a half out of Rudy Inlet, southeast, just put the compass, use the compass and go southeast. And then you start watching depth recorder. And all the water was, about 70 or 60 feet. And then when you went to 110 feet, you're off the edge. And so we'd come back because that was where the lumps were. And we'd come back on the lumps and start seriously trolling with lures on top of the water and with feathers. And we learned to not fish bucktails. We learned to buy, I don't know what they were called, no alibi. There was no alibis. Just little feathers about this big. And we caught a lot of fish. We caught a lot of tuna fish. And we caught them up to 50 pounds, and it was great fun. And we'd catch 20, 25, on a trip. And then it disappeared. And when that disappeared, it almost killed the charter fleet out of Rudy because they were depending so much on that. And then after July the 4th, the fish were gone. They'd go off marlin fishing. But before that, they had to depend on. After they were gone, they had to depend entirely on bluefish, and it almost killed the charter because everybody was going over there tuna fishing. When the news got out that they were catching tuna fish over there, everybody wanted to catch their own tuna fish. And, we used to have a big trout fishery here, and that's gone too. There are a lot of things that we used to have that are just not here anymore, and that's unfortunate. I don't know why people ask me, say, why don't we have flounder anymore? Why don't we have trout anymore? Why don't we have bluefin tuna? I don't have any answer. I think with rockfish, I think that I'm worried that they're dying. We get reports of the researchers, they're finding lots of baby rockfish every year up in the tributaries. They are Andromeda's fish. That is, they come and lay their eggs up in fresh water. And then the fish leave and go up to New England after they're about 3 years old. They live in the bay until they're about 3 years old, until they're about 5 pounds. And then when the migratory bunch comes down for the winter and joins them, if they're 3 years old, they'll leave and they start going with the adults. But I don't know why why the bay is not full of rockfish. I really don't know. I'm afraid they're dying. I'm afraid that they're being diseased or they're being eaten or I don't know. I can't answer it. I just know that we don't, and that's true. I don't know what's happening to flounder. The flounder are moving more northeast. The trawlers used to catch flounder right here off Virginia Beach within 3 or 4 miles, the big ocean-going trawlers. And then they kept moving. And now then, the ocean trawlers that bring flounder right in here to Hampton, they catch them up on the Hudson Canyon. They go up there and catch their flounder and bring them, and sea bass too. And then they bring them down here. They enter them as if they were caught off Virginia. But the flounder, there are flounder around wrecks out here, as that has been proved. But the trawlers, they don't fish them there. They're just not as plentiful. The flounder not. But the trawlers, I talk to the trawler captains, and they say every year they're having to go about 5 miles further northeast to find those big schools of edible flounder. Is it global warming? Is it lack of forage? I don't know. There are more menhaden in the ocean, I guess, than there have ever been. But we don't have a lot of menhaden in the bay. We don't have a lot of mature menhaden in the bay. And we do have, as you know, we have a commercial fishery that harvests a lot of small menhaden in the bay, and that may be hurting our fishery. I have no idea. I'd like to tell you, but I don't have any. The fishing managers don't know either.
So when you were fishing, we didn't have YouTube. We certainly didn't have live YouTube. The internet hadn't been invented yet. We didn't even have GPS. We didn't have modern electronics. How did you get your information about where to go fish and how to fish? What was your main source for sharing information?
Beg, steal, borrow, just conversation. My fishing club was probably the best. And fellow fishermen that would go, sometimes at the dock, like at Rudy, you'd come in and see some fish and you say, gosh, where'd you get those big fish? You know, and most time they'd tell you, you know, they'd say, and because there just weren't that many fishing. There weren't that many people fishing then.
So really
It's a little different now.
There really weren't even fishing magazines, and they didn't
No.
publish things in newspapers
No,
like that.
no. I was so excited when they came out with a Saltwater Sportsman magazine. You know, I was so excited, and because you could get some information. Also, I remember taking fish up to the Daily Press and asking them to take a picture of it because I wanted my picture in the newspaper in the Daily Press, you know, and they would come out and take a picture of it and it'd show up in the Daily Press. But they didn't do any, they would just, it'd be a big fish, maybe a 25-pound rockfish. That was big in those days, back in the 50s, you know.
So obviously now we have modern electronics, GPS, chart plotters, fish finders, you know,
Lots of fishermen.
so many. We have a lot of fishermen. Do you think our anglers today rely a little too much on technology to go fishing?
No. You got to have it. I mean, it's safe. It's safety to help you get home. No, it's helpful, and I just think that there's something wrong with the fish, and I mean, they maybe have mycobacteriosis and are dying before they mature. They may be starving. They may be something eating them. I think the gray trout years ago that we had, I think probably the rockfish were eating them, you know, when they were small. I don't know. Rockfish are opportunists. They'll eat anything. And they were in the same vicinity as the gray trout. I mean, we would be wirelining over at Plantation Light and we could see that on our depth recorder, we'd be going around the big schools of Menhaden, you know, dragging lures, and way deep on you could see little blips. And somebody said, there's a trout down there. So we took a small bucktail and put a fork rind on it and dropped it all the way to the bottom. And boom, boom, boom. Sure enough, you catch a trout about this big. There were a lot of trout down there. And I think the rockfish may have been feeding on the trout. I don't know, but the trout disappeared.
So can you name some of the people in your life that influenced your fishing the most?
Yeah,
just quickly mention their names.
Of course, Dr. Boatwright. Dr. Boatwright was my mentor, and he was good at everything he did. And I had a partner that came to me right at West Virginia after I've been practicing about 10 or 15 years. His name was Ron Godby. And Ron and I and Dr. Boatwright owned a 28-foot Uniflight together for 15 years, and we got along very well. Godby died when he was, I think, 57 years old. He had a heart attack and died. He was an excellent fisherman. Dr. Boatwright had many, many friends that I fished with. Lee White, who had Lee White Hardware and Newport News, and these are all men that are dead now. John Dickerson, who worked in the shipyard. John and I fished together a whole lot, and matter of fact, he made a grandfather clock for my grandson, and my grandson, I mean my son, and my son still has it. My son and he got along very well when they were little, when they were young. He made a big, tall grandfather clock in his garage, and my son, who's 55 years old, still has that. There were a lot of people, and most of them are gone. You know, Eddie Driscoll fished for me for years. Irvin Fenton fished for me for years, and they both died in the last 5 years. And when I lost, and a lot of the reason you fish is the people you go with. There's certain people that I got along with well, and I like them, and they fished the same way I did, and they could go, and they would go in rough weather. I remember I've been when it was snowing. I've been when it was blowing northeast. I think one reason I was a successful angler was my boat was pretty big, and I could go over to the high rise and catch a lot of fish, and even when other people couldn't go because of northeast winds. I think I could go over there, and I'd get over kind of protected from the eastern shore, and there weren't any boats over there. The boats had to come all the way from Rudy, or they had to come all the way across from Hampton or something, and we would buck the rough weather and get over there, and then it wasn't very rough, you know, and the fish were there, and so my days in fishing I've been blessed. I've been blessed, and a lot of friends. I still have friends that fish with me, and I fish with them. Most of them their backs are a problem, or their hearts are a problem now, or, you know, so it's limited. But I do have a couple that are younger that go. I told you I went with somebody about 2 weeks ago. They took me up to the Cut Channel in his boat, and
I only hope that when I reach your age, one, I'm still alive.
well, how old do you think I am? Wait a minute,
You're older than I am.
Yeah, a year or two maybe. I'm 80. I am 82 years old.
I hope I'm still alive, and I hope I'm still fishing.
I hope we can remember this all. I hope we can remember this all.
So,
Question.
question over here?
Yeah, we got one from Scott. He asked a little earlier about wirelining, and he wanted to know you're trying to stay as close to vertical as possible. Is that correct?
Straight up and down.
Not
No.
necessarily. No, not necessarily. We're moving along, and so in moving along, and your line and lure are going behind the boat 20 or 30 yards. But what you want them to do with the current, let it swing in on the legs of the bridge. Or if you're over rocks, you want to be really close to those rocks or over top of the rocks, you know. So you've got, your captain has to be pretty skilled at running the boat. And as I said, the captain really determines how everybody fishes because his line is in the correct position. And then everybody else has to be the same way. They may have to change their sinkers, or they may have to move on the other side of the boat a little bit, you know.
So I got one more question, and we're going to be running out of time here because we don't want to go much over an hour. I've been to some fishing meetings, and whether it's VMRC and others, and often I see one guy sitting in the fishery meetings, and it's Dr. Bob Allen, and he attends a lot, probably all, or as many as he can, a lot of the fishery meetings and trying to voice his concern and get involved in the process. So what made you do that? What made you decide to get involved in the process?
I don't really remember how I got started in it, but Jack Travelstead was commissioner. He was the main fisheries manager down there. And one day he said to me, he said, we don't ever have, yes, I do remember now how I got in it. He said, we never have recreational anglers at our meetings. We've just started, you and some others have started coming to our meetings. It used to be just commercial people came. And he said, this is just something. Now you go and there aren't that many commercial. There are a lot of recreational people. We've got a lot of recreationals on the committees. I've helped to do that. Tom Powers helped me. Jack Travelstead did it. Mr. Pruitt realized that the recreational fishermen were gaining in political strength. And so he started appointing people, you know, to committees and that sort of thing. I was trying to think. I do remember how I first got involved. It slipped me again. My old age has allowed that memory to slip. But when you asked me, I didn't know, but I know I got started. Oh, I know. We had, in my fishing club, we had an old, sorry to say a bad word. We had an old guy. I can't think of his name. And he started going to these meetings. He was a Coast Guard guy and retired. And he started going to these meetings. And he would come to our fishing club and give reports every meeting. And everybody'd go, oh, ho hum. You know, nobody wanted to hear what went on at the MRC. Nobody wanted to hear. Well, he kept going. He kept going. And finally, he got the governor to appoint him as a VMRC commissioner. He got on. And he was the first designated recreational fisherman on the Virginia Marine Resource Commission. There are 8 of them on there. And he got a seat. And now they appoint one as a recreational fisherman. The others are political appointees, sometimes commercial people, but Ken Neal is on there now as our recreational representative. For about 8 years, we had a very poor appointment. It was a real estate person in Virginia Beach, and you didn't even know he was there. You did not know he was there. He was, the only recreational about him was, I think he owned a marina. He owned real estate near a recreational area. But he didn't express our views. But this man did it, and then another guy, when he either died or retired, a man in our club named D. Johnson took over, and he started doing it. It was still ho-hum. And then and D moved away, and then another man in our club was made the, what do you call it, the government affairs person. He's still alive. And he, about 15 years ago, he came to me and he said, Bob, I go to the meetings, but I'm having a hearing problem. I can't hear what goes on. Would you go and sit these meetings for me? Would you become government affairs chairman? I said, yeah, I'll go. And that's how I started. That's really how I got started. Somebody asked me to go as a governmental affairs person, and I started going. And I realized a lot of times I was the only one there, only recreational person there. And so I kind of took it as my cross to bear that I'll be seen at every meeting.
And I will tell you, when we first started talking about Visa in the statewide organization, you were one of the first folks I reached out to because I knew you were involved in the process. I knew you had a good working relationship with all the fishing clubs, and I just want to personally thank you for doing that. And I want to offer you, if you want to make a couple of closing remarks. we're about out of time. You wanna
About,
just-
yeah, it's time. I think Visa is a great organization. I think we've worked very hard. We have built Visa on the skeleton of some other organizations. One was one I tried to form about 5 years ago, and it didn't go very far, but it was my fault. I was trying to get all the clubs under one umbrella, and we had one initial meeting. I got all the presidents together, and everybody was enthusiastic. I said, okay, guys, it's going to be an electronic organization. I called it the Virginia Council of Angling Clubs, and I appointed myself as chairperson, and we didn't vote on anything. And I said, we'll take no stands. I just want to communicate. I want everybody to communicate. It did not function very well, but I still have a good relationship with all those people. And even when we plan to put this on tonight, I have a list of those contacts, and I sent them all, and I said, we're going to be on here because I think that Visa is so important to fisheries management, because the VMRC frequently wants to know, we're going to have flounder regulations. What does the fisherman want? The fishermen, we've heard recently talk of maybe some changes in the cobia regulations. Well, VMRC has no way of knowing what we want, and so they've got to have an organization to go to. And Visa really fills that void, and we're going to have a good organization. We patterned it after the Maryland Saltwater Sport Fishing Association, which has a long history, and we're going to have a long history too. And we're going to have a big membership.
I hope so. Well, Dr. Allen, I thank you for taking the time to do this today, and I only hope that for years to come you're still on the water fishing.
I do too.
And you're still part of Visa.
And it's my pleasure to be here.
And going to meetings. So just in closing, everyone, I just want to encourage you to think about joining Visa. You can go to the webpage and join right online. It's only $25 a year. The more members that we have, the more influential we can be. And the more money we have, the more things we can do with it to help you, the recreational angler.
I want to add, I want to interrupt you. We are not competing with fishing clubs. We are supportive of fishing clubs. We'd like for all of you to join a fishing club, and there are about 14 of them around, and you can join them. And we want to work with the fishing clubs.
And that was exactly my last point. Is we support all the local fishing clubs, and in fact, we encourage you, if you're not a member of a fishing club, to find one that's closest to you and find out when they meet. Most of them meet once a month, and you don't have to be a member to go.
No, they're all free. They're all free.
You can just show up and attend and listen to the speakers, but you should also join a club too. And
if you attend, you will eventually join.
Yeah,
you'll recognize the value.
So we want to support all of our local fishing clubs around here and encourage everyone to attend as many as you can. So with that, we want to thank again Jerry for hosting us here in his office. And if anyone has any questions, you can shoot us a question on email. And we look forward to doing this at least once a month, having a different speaker. So thanks everyone, and good night.
Good night.
Say complete.